Hello there! I am back from the wilderness of 2020, here to share more memories with you all. It's time for a new season after many delays and real life stuff and lots of worries about COVID, so I figured it's time for, well, no better time than talking about a crazy addiction I had when I was a teenager. No, not a crappy mobile game or anything like that. And it's not quite time to talk about my love of arcade games in general, so let's talk about Pinball Mania. So, today we're gonna start with part 1 of this multi-part video series on a certain pinball series as I explain the first set of tables that started all for me in this brand new season of Eternal Memories. We won't be doing this in sequential order, of course, so like usual retrospectives I do based on series, I'll just come back and from whenever I feel like revisiting the series or if I have nostalgia going in me to share with you all. Cause, I have to get to other topics in the season too. Otherwise, I'd be talking about nothing but pinball for 2 years. So, let's get into it and transform into Season 4. It's time for a new season, so let's do it! Indeed, the wilderness of 2020 has been a long experience, hasn't it? As I mentioned earlier, I'm finally back, and we're kicking off a new season after many months of delays. Man, a lot of stuff happened in 2020. A lot of people complain, oh, it's the worst you ever made. Though for me, as I mentioned in other update videos, 2019 was still a lot worse due to more losses. In 2020, I didn't lose that many people, which is a good thing for me, but not good for most other people because it's been really hard in general. And I've been worried sick about just getting sick and dying a lot. So yeah, this whole last year was hard, and that meant it was hard for video making, and I just didn't have much motivation to do videos or retrospectives, and was nervous about my self-worth and whatnot. But I'm back, I'm picking up the pieces, and I'm hoping to finally get off the ground and get ready to share more memories with you this year for the 4th season of Eternal Memories. I upgrade quite a few things, you'll see and maybe notice throughout the course of the season. Though I really need to upgrade my lighting because I want a LED light instead of the lamp I use in my bedroom. But besides that, I work with what I get, and I'm still learning more all the time. So, today's episode, what would be a season premiere topic? Would it be a big game I grew up with? Would it be a franchise that's celebrating an anniversary this year or last year? Would it be some favorite franchise I'm gonna continue retrospective of? None of that yet, though those would come later in the season, I can say. Instead, today is about something that I want to start off simple because it represents my love for arcade score chasing in another fashion. I could do an arcade game, I'm going to do a lot of them this season, but today we're going to do an episode on Zen Studios pinball games. More specifically, the first one I ever played, Zen Pinball 3D. So that may make you ask, why Zen Pinball 3D? Why not Pinball FX 3? And yeah, I'm gonna use footage from Pinball FX 3 for the sake of this video. Footage because it's newer and it's basically the same as the old games if you change some settings. But I am covering the tables from Zen Pinball 3D because they were the first time I've played video pinball tables not made by Nintendo. And they were the first ones that really impacted me in a sense. Besides maybe some pinball on mini games and Sonic Adventure or whatnot, or those weird pre-installed pinball games in computers. No, this was the first real pinball game I played that was not made by Nintendo. It was just a third-party game I bought because I heard some good reviews from the European release, and then a YouTuber I liked named Balrog, Nintendo Game Room at the time of that video. I gave it a shot, and well, let's say I became quite a fan of the franchise, and to this day I'm still buying the pinball games on Xbox One, PS4, and Vita, and so I might as well get to the beginning and cover what started my pinball addiction to Zen Studios. But of course, you'll probably want to know what Zen Studios even is or what they do, so let's go into a bit of history on Zen Pinball IP and how these tables came to be. So technically, the Zen Pinball series originally started back in 2008, but before then, they actually made another pinball title for the Xbox 360 known as Pinball FX in 2007. And yeah, the tables that were in this game are really basic, and all but 3 of them haven't been re-released as of this video. But still, FX got praise for solid physics and fun layouts, so then Zen Studios decided to move to iOS for 2 pinball tables on mobile, Zen Pinball Roller Coaster and Zen Pinball Inferno. Unfortunately, they've been long delisted, and thus I don't even have much in the way of images or videos I can share of these, so I hope this little bit of info will suffice. Needless to say, Pinball FX1 has also been delisted, but due to the popularity, it's much easier to find images and videos of all those tables that were included with the game, or available as DLC. Yet, as Pinball FX continued to do well, Zen Studios wanted to bring the experience to PS3, but Microsoft had an exclusivity contract with Zen, so they had to make a separate experience for the Sony platform, and thus, Zen Pinball was born in May of 2009. With improved physics and table design and a decent amount of DLC support, this game was a huge success, and some of the DLC tables from Pinball FX made their jump to Zen Pinball. Pinball FX would catch up to Zen Pinball in 2010 when they would upgrade to Pinball FX 2, where it stood in place for over 7 years, adding some exclusive tables while also getting all the new content Zen was getting via DLC, and even got a VR version that you can still buy on Steam and mess around with if you have a headset. And then, the 3DS came out in 2011. After Pinball FX 2 launched, Zen decided to port the new pinball game to the new Nintendo console. And the new year of 2012, Zen Pinball 3D launched in North America with 4 tables from the PS3 version of the game, and only 4. These are Excalibur, a Middle Ages themed table, Shineman, a pretty poorly aged themed table, Earth Defense, an Alien Invasion themed table, and Elderwattle, an Aztec Mystery Adventure themed table. Zen did mention a few times in interviews about adding more to tables via DLC on the 3DS whenever Nintendo got stuff worked out, but this never came to pass, and the few extra tables they did release on the 3DS were via separate applications for Marvel and Star Wars, so I'll just cover the 4 that we started out with today, since they were the first ones I played. For the sake of convenience, and also because I don't even have the SD card I played the game on back in the day, I'm taking my footage from these 4 tables from gameplay I filmed in Pinball FX3, the newest revision of the pinball series out on all 4 major platforms. These tables play nearly identical save for some bonus modes and mechanics that you can turn off, so this is mostly accurate footage besides it being at a better frame rate than the 3DS's dirty frames and not having the unique 3DS features like the menu, the UI, and the extra achievements. So, let's look into what makes these 4 tables click for me and share the memories I built with them, from then to now. First up is Excalibur, which was a DLC table for Pinball FX1 and Zen Pinball. The main goal of this table is to duel in the kingdom and make their way to the round table as a legendary knight. There's a few main ramps on the table, and they're rather tricky to hit, but one of them takes you to this incredibly difficult battle scene, while the other can be used to activate events and score and even multi-balls. It's basically Zen's take on Medieval Madness, only not nearly as good. Back when I played this one on the 3DS, this was my second least favorite of 4, but now I actually dislike it a lot more. Especially when taking into account the other way better tables Zen could have ported to the 3DS instead of this one. The ramps get very boring, there's little to do, and it's not even that satisfying from a score chasing perspective because it takes forever to build up a good score in this one. Not to mention that stupid duel minigame I can still never beat despite a near decade of attempting it. Really the only praise I can give this one is that the multi-ball is very easy once you know where to aim. But honestly, this table is just my least favorite out of all the Zen's catalog on the 3DS, and it wastes a spot on the 3DS version outright. It could have been something like Paranormal or Sorcerer's Lair, but no, we got Excalibur. Next up is Shineman, or however the game wants to pronounce it, or however it's supposed to be pronounced. One of the original 4 tables that came with Zen Pinball on PS3 from the get-go. This one I enjoyed a ton as a teen, but nowadays, well, it's still a fun table and there's lots of fun scoring bonuses and combo mechanics, but the stereotypes on display here feel a bit, bad in hindsight. It's not outright offensive, just a bit strange and dated, maybe a bit too goofy, and probably should have been overlooked nowadays. I think they would have done this a lot better and more tastefully. But the table's still pretty great and fun and lots of enjoyable action still. with great combo potential, lots of fun bumpers to hit, and a very tricky elemental system that to this day I've never been able to fully master. But it's still a decent score chaser table, and one that's enjoyable even if new tables have far outclassed it. I touch this one now and then on my 3DS, and back then, this was my second favorite of the 4 back in the day. Now there's Earth Defense, which was my most hated table of these 4 back in the day to do one word. Whamps! So many whamps! And these were pretty tough to aim for too, especially the far left one. There were a variety of missions to take on, but I was never able to beat any of them as a kid. Though I did get good enough with the hole in the upper left to play for quite a while, since it can activate some bonuses and more mechanics. Still, I barely want to touch this one as a kid, and I just played the other tables instead, and this dopey robot drove me nuts too since it always was taunting me. But nowadays, it's a table I can actually appreciate a bit more. The whamps are tricky, yeah, but Pinball FX 3 have fixed my issues with the leftmost whamp in general, and my general increase in pinball skills over the year means I can actually do decent in the missions now. If I had to rank these tables nowadays, I'd swap this with Excalibur any day of the week, since this is just the better table of the two. The robot is still ridiculous though. But now, we've come to the best of the 4 tables in Pinball 3D. Elderwattle, one of the original Zen Pinball tables next to Shineman and 2 others that weren't included in this compilation. This table just had everything I liked about pinball at the time, with just the right amount of whamps, ton of targets to hit, fun challenges to mess with, combo potential, and just engagement that'll keep you playing and playing until you lose all the balls. This table is just outstanding. It even has a fun skill shot, and it's just so much more filled with variety compared to the other tables at the time. And the challenges feel a bit more reasonable to get with practice. You don't feel like that you are relying on RNG as much, but you actually have a chance to earn your way and earn those achievements and earn those missions and clear them. This was the first table I got an in-game achievement on too, and I even got the in-game achievement on in FX3D. I'm not master of this table by any means, but it's fair to say a good majority of my playtime with the 3DS version was solely dedicated to this table. It was the one I kept coming back to, it was easy to pick up and play, it was perfect on the handheld, and even had a good 3D effect to it. I still find this to be the best of the original 4 tables they made for the original PS3 version, and the best of the 4 3DS tables. To be blunt, the only things I'd change about Zen Pinball 3D as a port would be the table selection. For the 3DS, they did the best they could, incorporating in-game achievements smartly, a fun leaderboard I tried my darnest to climb as high as possible, and it ran at a good solid 30 frames a second, which was really darn good for the 3DS's early years before the Vita version of 2 just destroyed the 3DS ports in comparison. It was easily the best portable pinball game ever made at that point, honestly, maybe being neck and neck with the original Pokemon Pinball, since that one had a bunch of replay value with all the Pokemon despite having only 2 tables. But alas, I had hoped after enjoying the package immensely over the course of many months that Zen would deliver some exciting DLC and make the 3DS version a good platform for pinball action for at least a year or so. Because I knew there were so many cool Marvel tables, original tables, that they could have just brought over and it would have won amazingly on the 3DS, at least in terms of the 3D effect. Some of them I still think would have been really cool 3D showcases to this day. I had no knowledge of any Marvel characters besides Spider-Man at the time, but I was still wanting to play them nevertheless. I even read some interviews where Zen would remark that the DLC tables would probably happen as soon as Nintendo got DLC worked out on the 3DS, and that they may even try to do Nintendo-themed tables. I was so excited to buy up as many tables as my wallet could allow, and dreamed of all the cool Nintendo tables that could happen from Zen. Maybe Pokemon Pinball 3, a Zelda one, an NES-themed one, a Super Nintendo one, Mario, Kirby. The possibilities were endless, and it just was a good dream to have. And then Nintendo finally allowed DLC in 3DS games with D and Final Fantasy, leading Zen to say that they'd try to get things done for both Zen Pinball 3D and the upcoming Marvel Pinball 3D. And nothing happened. I waited, and they just never got tables added to those games. At all. Eventually, the Wii U came out and they focused on bringing those tables to that version of Zen Pinball 2, which was a long, drawn-out wait in and of itself. They did release Star Wars tables on 3DS after a while, but it was its own individual app again, and to make matters worse, it was horrifically buggy. To the point it just stuck with the Wii U and ditched the 3DS tables at that point, because they just ran better on the Wii U and were better supported, in all honesty. That means these 4 are the only Zen originals that hit the 3DS, and that's pretty sad. I did find the 3D effect rather neat on Elderwattle and Excalibur, as I mentioned earlier, but I was hoping to see Paranormal, Source was there, and the Street Fighter 2 table jump to the 3DS so they could see similar benefits as well. These games haven't been updated in years, and I don't even know the Star Wars 3DS port ever got fixed with all those bugs it had. But I definitely think as a super early 3DS eShop game, Zen Pinball 3D showed that indies could deliver amazing experiences on such a small screen, and to say it got me hooked on video pinball was an understatement, since to this day, I'm still rebuying these tables on Xbox Series X, Nintendo Switch, and even Steam. It's no question that out of these 4 tables, Elderwattle is the best of the bunch and definitely worth buying the core collection for in Pinball FX3, and that also includes Shineman along with the 2 other PS3 original tables. It's where it all began, and in 2012, 3DS owners got a nice slice of the pinball action. Even with better performing handheld versions of the game in existence now, I still think Zen Pinball 3D is worth a look if you're curious to see how they managed to cram 4 tables into one tiny screen in 240p in 2012. As for the tables in Marvel Pinball 3D and the Zen Pinball 2 experience in Wii U, let's save those for a later time. And who knows, maybe by that point, the fancy next-gen Pinball FX version will be out by the time I get around to covering them, and then I can film in like 60 FPS but with like ray tracing and fancy dancy effects and whatnot. Wowza, that was some epic pinball action. 4 tables, some were okay, and some I turned around on since I was a kid, and one is still the best after all these years. All 9 of them, oh my god, it's almost 10 years old, this 3DS version. I think the original Zen Pinball came out like maybe in 2010. It's been over a decade since the Zen Pinball brand has been alive, and I've been playing their pinball tables since 2012. These were the first 4 I played, and I have a lot more I can go into and reminisce about. But I think I'll do those in future videos far down the line, just cover different packs or like modes or platforms, because there's some fun history I can share with all of them, even the ones that are based off properties I don't even have knowledge about, like Star Wars or Marvel. I just played pinball because it's fun. Score chases in general I like to play because you get to do the best and redo and outdo the best performance every single time. So in real life I like a lot of pinball machines too, mostly Gottlieb and Batty machines from the 90s and 80s, and in terms of Gottlieb, the 70s and 60s even. But in terms of Zen Pinball, I think they're the only video game pinball original tables that I really like. In general, there's not that many original pinball tables that are on the market. Pokemon Pinball was there for a bit, and Mario Pinball Land some I do not want to talk about. But Pinball Arcade was all real tables, and they were represented okay. I can cover that sometime. And Zakaria Pinball is based off some European pinball chain, but also includes some original interpretations of tables that are not really as good as Zen's. So Zen is where it's at. And yeah, next gen is here, and that means there's a new Zen Pinball coming down the line for next gen. Who knows what we'll have? Maybe we'll have more real-life reproductions since they're doing that now themselves. Or maybe we'll get some sequels to some of these pinball tables I talked about today. I'd love to see a new take on Elderwattle now that Zen Studios has a bunch of new tools to use and a lot of experience from other games like Castle Storm and other stuff. But alas, we have to cover more pinball action later down the line, because I want to talk about other stuff, get back to some old business with some franchises we haven't touched on in a few years, cover some new franchises to the series I want to tell you about that I love a lot. But before we can do all that, we have one more roadblock before Season 4 can really just go all out. I have an obligation to cover my top 10 favorite games of the last decade, and even though we are a bit into the new decade, why not? So next time, on Eternal Memories, I will cover my favorite games from 2010 to 2019, and give some honorable mentions and whatnot to just explain, stuff I found interesting, either growing up during the year the game came out, or later on when I replayed it later in the decade and realized how good I missed out on what the game was. But yeah, just take care everyone, I apologize for the wait, and hopefully next episode won't take too much longer. I'm improving with every episode, so give me feedback in the comments if you want to, and I'll try my best to improve and just make my retrospectives just keep going so I can share more memories like I did today with Zen Pinball 3D. Take care everyone, and bye!